For y'all to listen, I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and good morning, Harry, to you, and good morning to Laura Slifer. It's Laura. My last name is, although it's just two syllables like yours, has always been mutilated. So, is it Slifer or Sleefer?
It's Schleifer.
Good.
And yes, it's often mutilated, but as long as nobody calls me Laura Schlesinger, I'm all good.
Well, there's we all have devilment in us. Some of it is more on our sleeve than others. But it's really good to see you on air. The show today, Laura's been kind enough to kind of not even recruit me, but just to enter my consciousness earlier this week about a really fascinating and historic event for New Haven that's taking place tomorrow at the Dixwell Community House on Dixwell Avenue. And a gentleman by the name of Callie Akuno, A-K-U-N-O, is going to receive the Gandhi Peace Award, 2023 Gandhi Peace Award, presented by the Promoting Enduring Peace Organization, which I believe, Laura, has been around since the early 1950s.
Yes, it's been around since 1952, and we've been giving the Gandhi Peace Award since 1960. So yeah, a long time.
And Laura is the program chair, so she's been kind enough to spare some time with me this morning, because again, I know her and her crew are kind of running around and working on the logistics and the plans and just making sure everything runs smoothly tomorrow at 2:00 at the Q House. And I mentioned when Laura kind of reached out to me earlier this week, I mentioned if just one more person comes tomorrow, because of this show, airing just the day before, that's a success for me. Every one person at a time. Laura, good to see you. And you're calling. You're in Portland. Where are you located on the planet at the moment?
Yeah. So I am in Portland, Connecticut. As we say, unceded Wangunk territory. Yeah. So. Okay, pretty excellent. Local to New Haven.
Excellent, and just glad to have you on the show. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about the event taking place tomorrow at 2:00. Callie's coming, and you've been kind enough in terms of your Facebook page to kind of mention the media exposure that Callie's been able to garner, and not just media exposure, but because sometimes sensationalism captures the media attention. But really, the substantive media support and his being on Democracy Now! Show and the YouTube links. We're blessed in New Haven to have this gentleman come. We're blessed to have the Enduring Peace Organization here in New Haven under Stanley Heller currently as part of the leadership, as well as others, and Laura now as the program chair. So Laura, kick us off. Tomorrow's important. Tell us why we need to be there, and and we'll just take the next 55 or so minutes, kind of just share why we need to give peace a chance. Let's give peace a chance.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a very important award recipient this year. And I personally feel that in some ways, this really could signal a new direction for our organization, for the peace movement in general, if they want to go that way. And really for the left more broadly, for social justice movements. I mean, for the climate justice movement, there's so many different elements to what Callie Akuno and Cooperation Jackson are doing that are really quite radical and revolutionary. And I guess I want to start by talking about the concept of enduring peace, right? Because that is our organization is promoting enduring peace. So, I think this is really kind of like signaling a big shift away from this idea of, number one, just sort of like this approach of incremental change, or, addressing each issue individually as it arises, protest this, protest that, and looking at these issues in a more foundational way. And so, when you're talking about enduring peace, you're not, there's that saying, right? No justice, no peace, which I think is very significant here, because it's saying, if you don't have that foundation of social justice, then you're never going to have peace, because there are always going to be, people above who are trying to grab more power and more resource hoarding. And, so there's going to be more imperialism and more colonialism and more invasions and more war. And then, of course, you're also going to have people on the bottom who are, they can't live in a state of peace because they are living in a state of deprivation. And so they're going to be fighting back. So you're never going to have peace if you don't have real justice. So Cooperation Jackson and Kali Akuno. So Kali Akuno is one of the co-founders of Cooperation Jackson. And you could say in some ways that Cooperation Jackson is the culmination of a long legacy of Black people in the US South really trying to build autonomy and escape the control of the white supremacist, capitalist, colonialist system. And a really big part of that has always been this issue of land reclamation, because if they don't have land, then they can't provide for their basic needs, and they are always going to be beholden to the white supremacist, capitalist, colonialist system. And of course, we're talking about people who have a long legacy of being displaced from their original land and then, of course, enslaved on this land. So that's really been a big focus for Cooperation Jackson. And it kind of is an outgrowth, you could say, in some ways, I would say, of the New African movement that happened in the 1970s, and that actually established as its capital originally right outside of Jackson, Mississippi, but was crushed by the FBI because they saw that as secessionist and threatening, again, to the current system. So, this has been a really long process in the making, but Cooperation Jackson itself was established in 2013. And so one of the main ideas, again, was this idea of land reclamation, of buying up large, as much land as possible. And so they, and then having that land for the community. So protecting it from gentrification, from real estate speculation, from basically the colonizers coming in and retaking that land and displacing people off it. Which, in this day and age, takes place through real estate speculation and gentrification. So they have been, they've established a community land trust named after Fannie Lou Hamer, who, of course, was a Black civil rights activist with a long history in Mississippi. And they've been buying up this land and repurposing it. So buying up the abandoned, the vacant lots and the old crumbling homes and all this sort of stuff, and then turning that into land that is made available to the community. So creating the affordable housing on that, and creating the farms for the community, the community gardens, and creating maker spaces where the community can produce their own goods, and creating, all of these things for the community, playgrounds and parks for children. And, some of this is stuff that they've already done, and some of it is stuff that they have plans for in the future. But it's really to address these issues, these social inequalities, these economic inequalities, and then, of course, the climate issue, which is a huge part of what promoting enduring peace does, because our whole mission as an organization is peace on Earth and also peace with Earth. And our dual mission is to foster peace and also ecological regeneration. So that's been a huge issue that Cooperation Jackson has been working on as well, is what to do about the climate crisis. And of course, Mississippi, and specifically Jackson, very vulnerable to the climate crisis. The whole southern part of the US and the world at large the global South, is extra vulnerable to the climate crisis. And of course, the great irony in that is that the global South is the least responsible for the climate crisis. They are the victims of the climate crisis and not the causers of the climate crisis. So, Cooperation Jackson has been doing a lot to address that issue as well, and specifically in a climate justice context. So, for example, things like buying up land, not just in Mississippi, but also now in Vermont, so that anybody who is in a situation where they need to become a climate refugee because their location has become so unlivable can relocate to Vermont. And things like working with high school students through their Regeneration Corps, which is teaching high school students about agroecology and climate issues and how that relates to racial injustice. So there's a lot of different things that they're doing. And then they're also addressing things on the economic level. They've got basically what would be kind of called a Jacksonian Green New Deal going. And so what they've done is they've really created a whole system of workers' cooperatives. So these are collectively owned, collectively controlled, democratically organized workers' co-ops. So no hierarchy, no, there's the owner and then there's the boss and the managers and then the workers underneath. But the workers themselves own and run the enterprises.
Good.
And that's, how they're getting that work done to produce all of these things that the community needs. And they're well-paid jobs. And, so they're really addressing a lot of different issues on these very fundamental levels. What do people need? They need food, they need jobs, they need housing, they need a safe climate, they need, all of these things that people really need. That's that fundamental root level that they are working on to address these issues. And the fantastic thing about it is that they're not just looking at implementing these ideas in Jackson, but they're really they're building what they call the Jackson Kush Plan. And that's an idea for this model to then be replicated throughout the US South and eventually beyond that to the rest of the country and even the rest of the world, and build that autonomy that way so that the communities can actually, especially the marginalized communities, the ones that are abused and neglected by the overarching systems of power and control, those communities are taking matters into their own hands and saying, well, we can do these things ourselves. We can run our own system and provide for our own basic needs with the resources that we have both within our community, the talents, the skills, the resources that we collectively pool together, and also through a solidarity network where if we don't have what we need, we can call upon other communities in other parts of the state, the nation, the world, and they can then send what we need and vice versa. And in doing that, really build autonomy and a new system that is collectively run and organized to replace this old hierarchical capitalist system.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and I'm having the pleasure of chatting with Laura Slifer, and she's the program chair for the Promoting Enduring Peace organization that started here in New Haven in 1952. But tomorrow, urging everyone to come out 2 p.m. at the Dixwell Q House. Callie Akuno, who you just heard, Laura, really just so cogently and detailed share his vision, and not only his vision, but the manifestation of Callie and his colleagues. Callie's going to receive the Gandhi Peace Award, 2 o'clock at the Q House. Laura, when you mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer, I love anybody that mentions Fannie Lou Hamer's name, regardless of the context. As you know, on Facebook, you have that where you can put your political party and your school and your education. Or maybe 10 years under political party, I put Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party as my political party, just to remind people that, of Fannie Lou, not to mention her other achievements and her beatings, et cetera. So I just love when people mention her name. Talk to me, Laura, about program chair. What does that mean? Is tomorrow a one-off? I love the fact that you mentioned the sustainability and the spreading through the globe of this initiative. But talk to me about other events that Promoting Enduring Peace might be involved with, or how people can get involved if they can't make it tomorrow. Just give me a little bit more context.
Yeah, so Promoting Enduring Peace is a very wide-ranging organization, and I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about it is that it does take a quite different approach to building peace and resisting the forces of oppression, war, imperialism, climate change. But they kind of look at things more on this foundational level of how can we support grassroots efforts. I'll tell you a little bit about, the history of the organization is that it was actually founded in the immediate after, well, of course, 1952, right? So the early stages of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea behind it was, we want to form solidarity with Russian peace activists. We don't like this idea of there being this, idea of the Russians as the enemy. And we want to find ways to communicate with them and work again on the grassroots level from below, finding solutions from below, not above. So, the powers that be, they're going to do their thing. But, we want to communicate with the so-called enemy nations, peace activists, and find solutions on that level. And, it was kind of funny because one of the things that they were known for at the time was they would organize these river trips or these like long boat rides for like a week. And they said, well, we would do that because we'd put the US peace activists and the Russian peace activists on the boat. But if they were disagreeing about things, they couldn't just leave. They had to work through their problems. They were stuck in the middle of the water, which I thought was brilliant. So, as program chair, I very much want to, really kind of like continue that legacy, number one, of kind of working through conflicts and, coming through to some sort of realization of common ground, or, just really kind of distilling it down to the human and ecological elements. And so some of the things that, I actually just started as program chair really only a year ago. So I am very, very new with a very old organization.
Yes.
But I will say that some of the things that we've been working on so far in the time that I've been working with Promoting Enduring Peace. So we actually, number one, I co-founded an organization in Gaza, which is called Plant the Land Team.
Good.
And that is an organization, again, about building communal food sovereignty and community organizing on the grassroots level of local Gazans, where they are, it's called Plant the Land Team because they plant their own food. And that's a big thing in Gaza because, of course, there are the sanctions on Gaza where they prevent, the Israelis are preventing Gazans from being able to import or export anything, including food.
Yes.
So, Promoting Enduring Peace has been involved in supporting fundraisers for Plant the Land Team to be able to plant and distribute food. I will mention also that it's vegan food. And that's been something that Promoting Enduring Peace has been kind of looking into because, of course, number one, if you want to talk about violence in the world, we do have to look at the violence that we do to other species, and also the climate issue, because plant-based food is much more ecologically friendly and less climate harming than producing animal-based foods. So another thing that they've done that's kind of along those lines is they had the most recent Schaefer lecturer, which was Christopher Sebastian McJetters, and he is a Black radical vegan. And he looks at the intersection between issues of oppression of non-human animals and then animalization being used as a form of racial subjugation and how those interrelate with white supremacy. And so he actually gave a lecture on that. And we also have some upcoming events that are
tease us.
Yeah. So some of the upcoming events that we have, one of them is a webinar that is going to be on the Stop Cop City movement. And that is really important for everyone to know about what's going on in Atlanta, Georgia right now with this, which is that there is a proposed construction of what they're calling, the activists are calling Cop City, which is basically a big police training camp, and it's going to be a very militarized police training camp. So they're actually, this is, even more militarization of the police. This has been ongoing really since the start of the War of Terror, is this militarization of the police where all of the military, the weapons and the LRADs and sound cannons and tanks in some cases, a lot of this stuff that is being used in these US imperialist wars abroad, once the military is done with them, then they give it to the police. And the police are also being trained by the Israeli police in these brutal tactics of how to suppress colonized populations, which of course in Israeli-occupied Palestine is the Palestinians, and in what I would call the US-occupied Turtle Island, aka the US, is the Black and Indigenous and Latinx populations. So this is a training camp that they want to build in Atlanta, and the plans to build this police training camp actually came out of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests, because basically the business community in Atlanta, the corporate business community, started to feel very threatened by these uprisings of Black and other marginalized and oppressed peoples saying, we are not going to accept being treated in this way anymore. And so they said, well, we have to clamp down on these people. We have to stop them from pushing back. And so they said, well, we're going to bulldoze this forest, which is actually, number one, a major biodiversity site. So there's an environmental issue at stake here. And number two, sacred indigenous land. And that's called Weelaunee Forest. So what you have is, now when I say that this is the business community behind this, I mean this really literally, because it's actually corporations like Delta Airlines, Home Depot, Wells Fargo, Waffle House. These are just some of the corporations that are actually privately funding this proposed Stop Cop City plan. So they've pushed the city to allow them to do this.
How will folks participate in the webinar? Should they go to your website? I mean, it's so exciting what you just mentioned.
Thank you. Yeah, we are going to be announcing the details of the webinar very soon after the event on Saturday. And I should mention that Kali Akuno has also been very involved in the Stop Cop City movement. And so what's going on now is that, you have these protesters that are basically camping out in the forest, trying to prevent this monstrosity from being constructed. And police have gone, they've opened fire on the protesters. They killed a protester who went by the name of Tortuguita, young indigenous Latinx protester, non-binary protester. And they claimed that Tortuguita fired first. And then that came out that was completely fabricated. And they've arrested many, many other protesters. And they actually are now threatening protesters with 20 years imprisonment just for passing out flyers about what is going on. in this forest. So it is just an outrageous situation on every level. And it's really, it's very important that everyone knows about this. And, of course, the plan is that they're going to build this in Atlanta, and then they're going to try and replicate this all over the US, in cities all over the country. So, it's kind of like just as Cooperation Jackson is trying to build a liberatory model for replication, then you have the oppressive powers that are trying to build an oppressive model for replication.
And Laura, well, folks, what website again, so people can kind of follow you and sustain and contribute and donate, etc.
Right. Yes. So the website is PE Peace. So that's PE, of course, for promoting enduring, and then peace.org. We also have a landing page where we are listing upcoming events, and that is peace-events.pepeace.org. And I'll just quickly mention also a couple of other upcoming events.
Please.
Yeah. So these are very much just in the early stages. We haven't organized these yet, but just some things that we've been talking about doing in the future. One of them is an actual webinar with the contributors of a new book that Kali Akuno just co-edited, which is called Jackson Rising Redux. So Jackson Rising was a book that Kali co-wrote, and this is a second book that has just come out recently, and this one is an anthology with many different contributors, all writing about these experiments with this sort of Cooperation Jackson model in other parts of the world. And so they're all writing from their unique perspective. So what we're thinking is that we're going to reach out to some of the contributors and do a webinar where they speak about their unique experiences in that arena.
Tremendous. And folks can hear directly from Kali tomorrow at 2:00 at the Dixwell Q House. Laura, what do you think? What do you think Kali is going to challenge us, or even more importantly, or just as importantly, ask us to do here in New Haven? I know you may not have seen his script or what he's going to present. And
that's a really good question.
but it's by the way, it's a free event tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, it is free, and we also are going to be offering free vegan baked goods as well. So yeah, we want to make this as accessible to everyone as possible.
And so what do you think he's going to ask us, or what do you think he should ask us, those that are attending tomorrow or those that will listen to the show, because the show will be widely disseminated to people even beyond Saturday? What might be the ask, not necessarily the takeaway, but the challenge or the request from Khalid to all of us anywhere on the planet?
That's a really great question. So I'll start by saying that I have absolutely no idea what he's going to be saying tomorrow. Indeed. I can only venture a guess, but I would say that he is probably, number one, I would say he's gonna probably say something about divesting from the idea of those in power kind of being the ones that are gonna solve the problems that they create. He's probably going to say something along those lines, because I have heard him say that before, and it's a really important point to drive home, because a lot of people are still invested in that idea, even if they think they're not.
Indeed.
So he's probably going to say something like that. He might say, and talk about really kind of like communities empowering themselves to take matters into their own hands. And if you're in a marginalized community, that's something that he's going to be encouraging marginalized communities and to say, you can do this because we've done it. Yes. And, it is doable. And if you are from a more privileged community, then he might say something to the extent of, how can you channel resources that you have to marginalized communities who need them? So he might say something along those lines. He might say something about community land trusts, which are a really great way to access land if you don't have it. And it's something that most people don't know about. So that's really a big part of this movement, is kind of becoming aware of these resources that are available but hidden. He might say something about that. He might say something about kind of gathering your neighbors and talking to them about, well, what is it that we need in this community? And, what do we have collectively that we can put together to solve these problems? Because that's a really, really big part of this Cooperation Jackson model is, this idea of stronger together. No, we're not going to solve these things individually, but collectively we have a lot, at our disposal, even if it's a poor and marginalized community. I mean, Jackson is one of the poorest cities in the US, and yet, the people in that community, they'll say things like, yeah, we don't have money, but guess what? We have amazing talent and skills and knowledge. And so we can do a lot without money. Yeah.
And 2:00 tomorrow, the Q House on Dixwell Avenue. Callie Akuno will be there. It's free. He's going to receive the Gandhi Peace Award 2023. Laura, share with us a little bit. I mean, when Amy Goodman was here several years ago, she was an award winner, I believe. You honored her. So I saw Amy, but when I looked at the other people, I mean, this is not a token's a bad word, but this is not a low life award in terms of people that have accepted and that you've nominated. So tease us a little bit with some of the predecessors, your previous award recipients.
Yeah, some amazing people have won this award for sure. So of course we can start with people like, well, the very first award recipient was Eleanor Roosevelt. That was way back in 1952. Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Gandhi Peace Award and never got to accept the award because he was actually assassinated before the ceremony happened. So that's kind of like, I mean, I would say out of everything, that's kind of, really one of the most important things to know about the history of this award. Cesar Chavez was a recipient of this award. And Daniel Ellsberg for the Pentagon Papers, he received this award. Ralph Nader received this award. Some recent people that I personally find very inspiring. So Kathy Kelly from Voices for Creative Nonviolence. I actually have a history of activism with Kathy Kelly because she was very involved in sending delegations of witnesses to Iraq during the period when the US was putting these murderous sanctions on Iraq. So that was after the 1991 Gulf War and before the 2003 US invasion of Iraq under Bush II. And so during that period, not many people know about that. The US sanctions essentially starved 1.5 million Iraqis to death, including 600,000 children. And so Kathy Kelly was sending groups of US citizens to go and see what our government was doing to Iraq. And this was illegal to send people at that time. And she actually at one point faced a 20-year prison sentence for doing that. So I wanted to go on one of those delegations. And, by the time I was ready to do something like that, it was after the 2003 invasion. But I actually spent 11 days with Kathy Kelly in the immediate aftermath of September 11th on a walk for peace against the US bombing of Afghanistan from Washington, D.C. to New York. And that was actually led by family members of people who had been killed on September 11th in the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. So that was something that, I had that history with Kathy Kelly. And then I will also mention that I did a tour of the Palestinian West Bank and Egypt and Jordan, a theater tour, actually, because I'm a theater performer as well. And Kathy Kelly helped me to organize the section of the tour that was for Iraqi refugees in Jordan. So I was especially happy to hear that they had given her that award. And I also want to talk about Omar Barghouti, who is the founder of the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And that was especially that's really important for people to know about who are listening, which is that that was modeled on the South African boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement to protest against apartheid in South Africa, and really kind of led to the official apartheid system being brought down. And so the Palestinians, and specifically Omar Barghouti, thought, well, we can implement a similar strategy against apartheid Israel.
Excellent.
Right. So getting people all over the world to boycott Israeli products, especially those produced in the Israeli-occupied Palestinian West Bank, to boycott coming and making public appearances in Israel. So, pressure campaigns on artists, musicians and political figures, don't go to Israel and speak there or perform there, because that is giving legitimacy to Israel, the illegal occupier of Palestine, and pressuring governments to put sanctions on Israel. So that's been a very powerful, nonviolent way of resisting apartheid and colonialism and occupation that the Palestinians have implemented. And Omar Barghouti was the founder of that movement. So he also received the Gandhi Peace Award. So yeah, really, really amazing people.
Tremendous. And I mentioned earlier, when anyone mentions Fannie Lou Hamer's name, I get excited, have a love emotion through my body. And similar with Gandhi, when anything that's connected, when I see Gandhi's name, and I always like to remind people that Pakistan did not always exist. And I also ask folks who killed Gandhi. So this these historical names, these historical and historical names are so important to kind of lift up in our consciousness on a 24/7, 365 basis. Tremendous. Laura, we have about 10 more minutes, so we can kind of wind down. And as things cross your mind about sharing, just when you talked in the opening segments about really turning swords into plowshares, you hear that term, but it's amazing that phrases of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago still have resonance. Metaphors of turning swords into plowshares is just so. We need to strive for that to happen. Just respect what you're doing. What's kept you on a psychological note, if you don't mind my sharing to our 5,000 million readers, and you're sharing your traumas and your travails. What's kept you passionate and engaged and concerned, but not just concerned, but putting your body, mind, spirit into the possible reality of, can we all get along? What's kept you stoked over these years? Other than the marijuana and LSD, but you don't have to say that, even if that's the case. You can give a hybrid.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like I don't know, for me personally, I always was very conscious of and troubled by inequality and injustice. And I just kind of never felt like I've always had this kind of like internal sense of like, this is an emergency. Like everything else has to stop until this is resolved. I've always wondered, like, how can you not be in this constant state of my God, like, how can anything else even matter when there is so much injustice happening as a daily status quo? So, it just was always something that was kind of like, and I don't know, I started to be conscious of that, at a very young age. But once you start kind of like paying attention to that, then you can kind of see the roots of things as they evolve, or I should say devolve. So, you look at the situation now, and it's like, I think a lot of people now are aware that things are not going particularly well in this society. And we're having this sort of like mass psychic breakdown in a lot of ways. And but people feel very kind of like powerless, and they feel like they don't know in a lot of cases what happened. How did we get here? How did it end up with things being so bad? And so I feel like anybody that really has some ideas about that, and has some ideas about how to get us out of this mess, we've got to really come out now and use that. Again, it's that same thing like with Kali, Akuno, and Corporation Jackson, right? What resources we have, we've got to pool them, because we're in a big mess right now. And we're in a mess on the communal level, and we're in a mess on the bigger communal level, on the societal level. So it's like, now is, especially the time to come out and really speak and really act, because now is a time where people are actually realizing there's a really big problem here and we need answers. So if you have an idea of answers as to how we got there, and answers to what we might be able to do, come out and speak, but not only speak, listen, and share, right? I've got some ideas, but I don't know everything. Obviously, I can't know everything, but you know a lot of things. And you can share your information and your ideas, and we can cross-pollinate ideas, and we can come up with some solutions. But I think there's a general sense of the people in power, A, don't know what they're doing, and B, have intentions that are very different to ours, motives that are very different to ours on the grassroots level. So now is especially the time to come out and really jump on that and build something new.
But my thoughts are going a little bit also, Laura, as you were speaking during this conversation in terms of Corporation Jackson. I would say that most people have heard off and on, either in great detail or just incrementally, about the water crisis in Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, and I'll probably ask Kelly tomorrow to kind of give us an update on how that has continued to happen and not be resolved expeditiously and fairly. Right.
Yeah. So what happened with the water crisis, as I understand it, now, of course, I am not a Jacksonian, so I'm speaking about all of these things from afar, but from what I understand, the water crisis was many years in the making. And according to Kali, goes all the way back really to the urban renewal movement of the not even movement, but the urban renewal policies of the 1950s and 60s, where basically the government started investing all this money in building up the suburbs. And you had this massive white flight evacuation out of the cities and moving into the suburbs. And of course, this is where you get the whole, redlining policies as well, where the white people were able to get the houses in the suburbs, and the Black people and other people of color were not. And so then the cities were left to crumble, and the capital investment, there was no investment in the cities, and the cities were just like crumbling. And so you have a city like Jackson, but also this is the same thing with like Flint, Michigan, and Newark and other cities where they've had water crises. It's that same pattern. So in Jackson, the situation was just deteriorating, where they were not getting the funding. And of course, the state government also doesn't want to fund Jackson because it's very white, racist, reactionary, Republican. So they didn't want to give funding to Jackson City to be able to fix this increasing water problem. And then about 10 years ago, a big corporation came, which was Siemens. And they said, well, we will give you a solution to your water crisis, but it's going to cost you $90 million, which at that stage was the most expensive of any contract for a city to hire a private contractor to fix supposedly a problem. And so Siemens says, well, we're going to install these water meters, and that will tell you what's going on with your water system. And not only will it help you with that, but it's going to pay for itself, and also it's going to make money because people will be buying them. And then that money is you'll actually come out ahead. Not only will you make your $90 million back, but you will actually have more money, which you can then use to actually fix the problem of the water. And so the city did that, and it turned out to be an absolute disaster. The water meters didn't work. And then there were like all kinds of crazy things happening with the billing, where, a lot of people weren't even getting water bills. And then some people were getting like massively exaggerated water bills. And so they didn't pay them. And so the city just started going further and further and further into deficit. And they ended up suing Siemens. And believe it or not, they won the lawsuit. But, over the course of that 10 years of the deficit, what ended up happening was that by the time they got that lawsuit, they were so underwater financially, to use like that pun here. They were so buried that all of that money got sucked up by, number one, paying the lawyers. Lawyers took like a third of the money. And then they had all of these water bills that had been unpaid. So they had to compensate for that. And then on top of that, to come up with that $90 million in the first place, they had to sell off a lot of bonds. And so that money then went to pay the bonds. So by the time they were done with all of that, they had nothing. So then they still had this water crisis. Things had just gotten worse. 10 years of deterioration of crumbling infrastructure. And then, of course, we have the climate change. And then the water, the floods came, and, everything broke, and Jackson was flooded, and all the water was contaminated. And it was really bad because, they knew, like the mayor was saying, get out, you have to evacuate. Actually, I'm not sure if that was the mayor or the governor, but they were being told to evacuate. And Corporation Jackson kind of knew from previous experiences that the state government, they were not going to get them the aid, again, for the reasons that I mentioned before, right? So they said, well, we have to take matters into our own hands to make sure that Jackson City residents have water. And the good thing was that because of this system that they've been building, of this solidarity network, they had contacts in other communities, not only throughout the state of Mississippi, but regionally throughout the Gulf Coast. They put out a call to the entire Gulf Coast, all their allies, and they said, can you send us help? We need to get help immediately. And so all this, there was help that came in. And so that was Akuno and Corporation Jackson really at the heart of getting that water to people who needed it. That was one of the things I remember last fall. They were fundraising for water pallets so that they could treat the water and provide that. And so, of course, Promoting Enduring Peace, boosted that fundraiser. But yeah, so that's basically what's been going on. And the concern is that, the ultimate quote unquote solution that the state government is going to have is basically privatization, right? So instead of actually giving funds to Jackson that it needs, they'll just say, oh, well, we'll bring in like these, private contractors, or I should say just more centralization, which has been happening because they just passed, for example, a law saying that the state police were going to be handling things that normally would be handled by local police and local courts in Jackson. So again, you have the state government, very white, very Republican, very reactionary. And Jackson City, on the other hand, that's a massively Black majority city. It's a very poor working class city. And, the government, the mayor, the system there is more representative of the people in Jackson than the state government is.
Yes. Laura, we have about 3 more minutes. I want to give you kind of the closing last word. And I really appreciate everything you've said during this conversation, but even just the last 8 minutes of talking about the municipal, the state, the city, the financing, the corporations, people issues, and profits over people in terms of Jackson. Is just, I hope people have listened clearly about hear this word intersectionality. It's not a neutral term. Some people are survive and others are oppressed by it. The National Association of Black Elected Officials are meeting in Jackson, their annual conference in July. I hope to come down there for that. Laura, we have about 3 more minutes, kind of share the last a few thoughts. Again, that we're urging everybody to come out tomorrow, Saturday, May 13th, at the Q House here in New Haven on Dixwell Avenue at 2 p.m. And Callie Akuno is going to receive the Gandhi Peace Award 2023. I think Michael Mills, our local performing artist, is going to be performing, and you'll have food. So it'll be not only a fun event and not only a party with a purpose, but yeah, just kind of come and get re-energized, revamped, re-strategized, bolstered for living on this planet in a peaceful way. Laura, let's anything that kind of cross in your mind. Again, I'm girding up my loins to get there so I can rearrange my schedule. I don't live that far from the Q House, so I don't have a logistical problem other than being able to clone myself. But we'll work on that a little later.
I can totally relate to that. I'm always saying that too. I need to clone myself. I need to be in 15 different places at once. Yeah, I would say the last note I want to leave this on is basically just for people to be aware that this, what is going on in Cooperation Jackson and the Jackson Cush Plan, and something else that they've created, which is the People's Network for Land and Liberation. So these are bigger networks of this idea of, the change on the local level, the grassroots communal organizing and taking control, communities taking control of their own reality, of their own circumstances. And then, a network of these communities, and really building up participatory democracy through these people's assemblies of these communities making the decisions that affect the local reality, individually, but then, having these wider assemblies to make these bigger decisions collectively. And when I say that, I don't mean representative democracy, right? I don't mean, somebody that represents the community making decisions on their behalf, but rather the communities themselves discussing things, hashing through things, and then coming to a decision. And then that's that community's decision individually. So this is a part of a wider movement, which has like different names. Some people call it the communalist movement. Some people call it the libertarian municipalist or democratic municipalist movement. There's another very important radical experiment in implementing these ideas in real terms in with the Kurdish population in Rojava, in northeastern Syria, but also in other parts of what was originally Kurdistan that is now occupied by multiple countries. There's the Zapatista movement in Chiapas, Mexico. There's the I don't know if I'm pronouncing this the right way, the Sarvodaya movement in Sri Lanka. And there's also other cooperations throughout what we call the U.S. occupied Turtle Island, right? So there's Cooperation Tulsa, there's Cooperation Denton, there's Cooperation Humboldt, there's Cooperation Vermont. There's there's the Olympia Assembly in Washington State. There's a People's Assembly in Detroit. There's a lot of different, and there's also a network called Symbiosis Revolution, and that is a network of all of these communal movements throughout the North America. So there's going to be an event actually taking place this summer in July. I think it's the 7th through the 13th in Detroit. And Kali Akuno is going to be one of the main organizers of this event. And it's going to be speaking about building this sort of movement and teaching people how to do that. They had one last summer in Vermont, which I attended.
Excellent.
And there's going to be another one this summer, and there's going to be many more after that. So this is really a movement that people can get involved with on a wider level.
July 7th through when again?
I think it's the 7th through the 13th.
In Detroit, and we have to wrap up. And Laura, I hope to see you tomorrow. Harry, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Please, folks, come out tomorrow, Saturday, May 13th, 2 o'clock, the Q House. See Laura, meet Kali Akuno, and other friends.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.